Silenced is so gripping and incredibly compelling, and I've read all of Rosie Lewis's books, and by far this is the one that I enjoyed the most. But it's also very frustrating. In a way, of course, that's gripping and makes me want to continue reading, but it did frustrate me, and I will explain what I mean by that with a slight spoiler warning, but for the most part, I'm not going to give anything away, and absolutely, I will not give away the ending. Because for me, one of the things I loved about this, as with most foster carer books, is the ending not ever being that clear, and I feel like this was the case with this one. Pretty much all the way through it, I had no idea what direction it was going to take, and it constantly surprised me, and that kept me hooked all of the way through. This was released this year. In fact, it was released in July 2022, and this one's a little bit different to begin with because Rosie Lewis isn't taking in children into her home necessarily. She agrees to help out this family while they find their feet because the mother has gone into hospital, into a psychiatric ward, I believe, and these children are, most of them are boisterous, off the rails, hyperactive, unruly, difficult to control, apart from Caitlin. Caitlin is a 9-year-old girl who is not entirely mute. It is definitely selective mutism, but she's very reserved, very shy, very withdrawn, and straight away Rosie Lewis realizes there's something that doesn't add up here. There's something about the family dynamic. The children go to stay with their grandparents. There's something about the family dynamic that just doesn't work out. And she spends her time with these children. Occasionally they will stay at her house overnight, in theory to give the grandparents a break, but it's also a chance for Rosie to work closely with the children and to find out more about them and their life, and for her to dig a little bit deeper into what may be going on behind closed doors. And I don't want to say much more about that because I will say, expect the unexpected. I thought I knew pretty quickly what was going on. I had made up my mind very early into this that this person was responsible for these actions, and I was wrong. I won't, of course, divulge what I thought it was because I don't want to lead you down any paths, but I was definitely wrong. There are some characters in this I wanted to grab by the shoulders and shake, and some behaviours that I do not agree with. One thing that did frustrate me, and I completely understand why, Bartley, the 10-year-old boy, the oldest child, is vile to his sister, to Caitlin. And he verbally abuses her, physically abuses her, and as Rosie points out quite early on, because she has limited time with the children, she can't start trying to change their behaviours, because also as soon as she says don't do that, the next day they're going back to their grandparents and the old behaviours will kick in. Completely understand that. But instead of giving Bartley into trouble when he hurt Caitlin, she would often use distraction techniques instead, which again, I understand. But if I was Caitlin in that position, I would want somebody to tell Bartley he was doing wrong, because by not actually addressing the bad behaviour in the moment, it could convince Caitlin that since he's not getting into trouble for it, maybe his actions are okay, and that it's fine for him to do that. Because obviously a 9-year-old is not necessarily going to be able to comprehend the benefit of distraction techniques, of, because if Rosie Lewis gave him into trouble outright, it could escalate the situation. She could come off as the bad guy. It could ruin her ability to find out some pivotal information about what was going on with his family. Completely understand the decision, but if I were Caitlin in that situation, and nobody was telling Bartley that he was doing a bad thing, it would really hurt me. Not that he was never told that. There were plenty of times when he was. So I'm aware that certain times, there's a time and a place, and just more often than not, distraction techniques were used, which I completely understand, but it was very frustrating. There were certain behaviours of some other characters who frustrated me, but again, well, with those ones, it was more of a, I'm really frustrated, why are they doing this? I want to know more, let's keep reading and find out. And I absolutely adored it. It's gripping. It's a little bit inconsistent. There is one bit where it says, to paraphrase, I think somebody says, what day is it? And they say it's the 15th of whatever. It's the 15th, tomorrow is Caitlin's birthday. Cut to the next chapter, and they awake on the 17th for Caitlin's birthday surprise. Now that's just a couple of paragraphs apart, and an editor really should have picked up on that. But aside from that, and a few other inconsistencies, generally it's really well written, very well edited, it flows very well, and as I said, it is just an absolute roller coaster. It's gripping, it's delightful. Of course, when you remember that it's based on truth, I'm not sure, you can never quite tell with foster care memoirs how much of it is 100% truth and how much of it is kind of adapted, because they have to make certain changes so that the children's identity or the identities of their families aren't known to anybody reading it. So there are obviously changes made, but either way, it's based on truth, and it's pretty harrowing, but also fantastic. Really, really gripping. There are things that are mentioned in the very beginning that are looped back around to near the end, so it does have this consistency to it for the most part, just with a few things that were an oversight on the editor's part. But if you're a fan of foster care memoirs, you absolutely need to read Silenced. If you're a fan of Rosie Lewis, I'm 100% confident you will love this. I truly adored it, and I cannot recommend it enough.